So, I'm so sorry, but we had to speak about the credentials from Germany.
Germany?
Yes, from Germany due to the elections in Berlin and however. And interestingly, one of the ones who were one of the main actors 10 years ago, he say he don't understand this organization, why we don't deal in a different way with his credentials. It's interesting because as I was a witness in elections in Azerbaijan, I have a lot of concerns about the outcome of the elections. If we always would make the challenge here, we would not even have the opportunity to discuss anything. So warm welcome to all of you. Sorry for this delay, and unfortunately at the end it limits our time for this side event, but I thank you very much for this interest and for the participation. I would like to thank the Friedrich Ebert Foundation to support it. Later you can refresh yourself outside a little bit. Peter will say a few words after me, but for sure I would like to welcome you. We two of us want to welcome you because we thought it's a good opportunity 10 years after the report and not report, finally, the failure, I don't know how to describe it. So there was a report about political prisoners in Azerbaijan in the Parliamentary Assembly, and I remember I was quite new in this organization, and I don't want to speak too much about the substance because it will come later, but I still imagine that I didn't really understand what was going on, but I really have still this atmosphere in my mind. And this was, to say it soft, disturbing, astonishing, but I would say it was shocking, because you can think about whatever in the world, but if there is a discussion about political prisoners in a country, and this organization is about to help them, and then there is a decision that there are no political prisoners in the country, finally, and then there is a lot of kind of party in the hemicycle where people say, wow, we win this. This was so shocking for me. I didn't understand this organization. And from the perspective of today, I said, even I have to leave this organization because this is a kind of nonsense. This organization is not doing what they should do, or we have to do something against it. Later, we got the opportunity to do something against it, and some of you and all of them who are here were part of this. And as we see now in the European Parliament, there is still this kind of challenge on corruption, and it's just the top of the ice mountain, I don't know what is it, of the iceberg, what we are seeing, and we have to do everything to prevent and to fight against it. And a few minutes later, afterwards, here I will be in the Rules Committee, what is in camera, but I'm making the report, a new report, to prevent corruption in this organization. So this has something to do together, but to understand what is our challenge today and what is our need today, what we have to do, you have to know what is the history of the situation as well. And because of this, we are here. I'm very happy that after Peter, Christoph Stresser, who was the rapporteur, will explain a little bit from his point of view about the historical situation and maybe a view from someone who is no more member of Parliament anymore. And then we will see Gerald Knaus from the European Stability Initiative, who were the one and others who organize some investigation to understand really what was going on. Then we have our Deputy Secretary General here, Björn Berge, thank you very much, to show that we did something in the past, but that we are still doing things and that there are still some challenges. Then we have a little bit time, hopefully, for some questions and replies, not very much, and then we conclude and you refresh while I have to rush and others to other committees. So thank you very much again, Peter.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming, and very glad that Christopher Stresser is here in particular, because he did the hard work on this report. And sometimes a failed report can actually have some results later than you think, and whatever happens. This organization was built after the rubbles of the Second World War, never to have war again, never to have a genocide again, never to have political prisoners again, and to build on a free, open, democratic society without corruption. Well, we failed on the first war. We failed on the first thing, on war. We failed on genocide. Well, I'll tell you more about that later. And we did manage a little bit on corruption and political prisoners. And I think we should strengthen that framework. This particular case has shown that standing up against corruption is possible, though it may be costly for the people who are standing up against it. And that the recent cases within the European Parliament, where I think we just indeed see the tip of the iceberg, as Frank has just mentioned, will mean that we need a far stronger framework within our own organization to fight corruption. By the way, there's one positive thing about corruption. This organization is being corrupted because it's relevant. If it were irrelevant, no one would come and corrupt it here. And it is relevant because, for instance, on the political prisoners issue, there are political prisoners. There are political prisoners in Azerbaijan. There are political prisoners in Turkey. And there are political prisoners in Russia. And obviously Russia is no longer a member of this organization. But for far too long, we've been just letting it go and write another letter or do something. And I think there should be a somewhat more stronger framework when this organization determines there is a political prisoner. And that should be quite a high barrier. So you can't just say it, just, oh, I think that, no, there's a really, that's why the stress report was really important. Then there should be consequences. Because if you determine there are political prisoners, and if afterwards you do not take a consequence as an organization, you basically say it's okay. And I think we should stop doing that. So the same way we challenged the German credentials, because you did the recounting in a way it should be recounted in after an election. If something goes wrong, you do recounting in, I think it's 2 or 3 Berlin quarters, and that's the way you deal with mistakes. But it's very strange that countries not being challenged on political prisoners. And they can still keep the membership. So I hope we can have a discussion on that here today. And I'll run off early as well, but that has to do with my report on Daesh fighters. Thank you for organizing it to your Stiftung.
We have the honor, you said already, that Christoph Stresser is back after 10 years. You was here meanwhile as well, but you are no more member of parliament. You was meanwhile president of a local football club, very famous one in Germany, Preußen Münster. And now you have the floor. Thank you very much that you are here with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank and Peter, for the invitation. It's not only 10 years since the resolution was rejected, it's exactly the same day. It was on the 23rd of January 2013 when we met together in the hemicycle, and as I read in the report of Gerald Knaus, it was the best visited plenum ever in the Council of Europe, in the Parliamentarian Assembly, and the most voters that ever came to such a vote. That shows that there were maybe more interests in finding a solution for the problems that were reported than maybe to other important questions. And I think after the voting, some people learned why it was in this way. But let me look back to the year 2009, when I was mandated with a report on the political prisoners, the follow-up of political prisoners in Azerbaijan. I say follow-up for a special reason. Some of the points that were argued against me and against the mandate were, why do you only look at Azerbaijan and not, for example, to other countries, such in this context always Armenia or other of the 47 member states of the Council of Europe. For me, it was a very simple answer. The same parliamentarian assembly and the same committee for legal affairs and human rights, from the members of this came the question, why do you do only this? These were the same people who gave the mandate to me. And they gave not the mandate to me to explore and to look to other countries. And I always said, we are discussing on Germany. If there had been a mandate to look if there are political prisoners in Germany, it was a good chance for the Council of Europe to check. And I myself, I am German, and it would be had not been very good that someone as from the same nation should be the rapporteur, but I had never any resistance. And this was the first point why I asked, what did you do when you accepted the mandate? Some people asked me, do you know what you are doing? And I thought, what? This is one of the most important jobs you can do in the Council of Europe. You mentioned, Frank and Peter, the Council of Europe is the basis for human rights in Europe. After the experiences of the Second World War, of the German fascism, and we were proud as Germany that we could become member of this institution, and therefore for me it was self-evident to say, okay, if I am asked, I try my very best to make an objective report on the situation as we found it. So, and then it started, I have not so much time, one of the most, from my point of view, important principles of the Council of Europe. When there is a mandate, the rapporteur must have the chance and the opportunity to go to the country that is object of the report. And I think you know, I had not the opportunity, at no time, to go to Azerbaijan to make also the discussion with the government, with the political prisoners, with the civil society. They always denied because I was biased to Azerbaijan. And for me it was completely clear, I must say, when I got this mandate, I had not so many ideas about the country of Azerbaijan, but I had a lot to do and to work to find out what is the basis for my mandate, and I wanted to do it as I understand the work as a rapporteur of the Council of Europe to be objective. And this was, for me, the first important point. And I think, and I believe, and I'm sure that was during the 4-year period that I was working on this mandate, it was always the basis for my job. And therefore, we had a lot of debates here in Strasbourg, in the committees in Paris, where we always discussed and where I made a lot of compromise. What the title and the contents of the report that was I think a very curious development. The report was accepted with a big majority in the Committee for Legal Affairs and Human Rights. And everybody asked what is going on. After 3 years, after nearly 4 years, where we always had the impression everything is going different from normal reports in this space. And when we entered the plenary meeting, everybody knew what was going on. The opposition, the people who wanted to reject had said, why should we go to the committee? We have a majority in the plenary meeting and that's enough. And we had, and this is, people say always, this is the Stresser report. At the moment we opened the meeting, the session here in the plenary, it was a report of the Committee for Human Rights and Legal Affairs, not my report. I think it's important to know, because if such a report is rejected, it's a clear signal to the Committee for Human Rights and Legal Affairs. This is for me a very, very clear result of this. And the development of the report, I can't tell you within a few minutes, but I only mentioned and could feel that it was not only, especially from colleagues from all groups in the Parliamentarian Assembly, that it was not only the conviction about the contents of the report. This was getting clear after the voting was finished, and I must say it was for me not a personal political disaster. Okay, I'm working politically since many decades. You win, you lose. But what was going on in this case, it was not also, although the most of the opponents said this is my personal problem. While I am an enemy of Azerbaijan and I do not look into other regions, it was a completely different situation. And we felt, and I think I'll come to the end of what I would want to say. Two things. The first thing, I had in 2019, I got an invitation to an Italian law court in Milan. Accused was a person, I can tell the name, he is known and the judgment is clear, it was Luca Volonté. And the problem he was accused was money from Azerbaijan, more than $2 million. And he was in the procedure is still not finished because he was condemned for, I don't know, but he made a revision and we don't know. But it's not in discussion that there was a flow not only of money but also of other things to buy the votes in favor of Azerbaijan. This is not my conviction. I think this is very, very clear to all who were engaged and who were working in this case. And this is my second point, my last point. What was going on in this debate was a kind of making the Council of Europe completely uncredible. This is what was my point of view after we stopped. The leader of the Azerbaijan delegation, Mr. Seyidov, I don't know, I think he is still a member of the...
He spoke today about the German credentials.
He stood up after the voting and said, this is a good day for the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe does not belong to Mr. Schresser, but it's our Council of Europe. And I think if this is a saying, the Council of Europe could say, okay, we were not able to fulfill our own destinations, our own contents. My problem was the Council of Europe, what has lost his own convictions to be the basis for human rights in Europe, on the European continent. This was for me the result, and I must say what we see in many other also European institutions, maybe national parliaments, we have a lot to do to bring this discussion every day, to make it every day public, because the biggest basis for democracy in Europe is a confidence in the institutions. And if it's not present, I think the democracy, rule of law in Europe is in a very, very big danger, and therefore it's good that have some other resolutions, especially on the situation in Azerbaijan. And we have all the duty to fight that this institution stays what it was, what it was founded as a center for democracy and human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for your words today and for your work, hard work in the past. So if you look into the timeline, it was 23rd of January 2013. We came a little bit later, but then the next step was on the timeline. Gerald Knaus, maybe before, I don't know, we'll hear about it. Please, Gerald.
Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure, and I want to thank Frank and Peter for the invitation. And of course, to be on a panel with Christoph Stresser, with the people who have fought to make this institution live up to its promise and to its purpose. That's always a pleasure. I would like to do three things to remind everyone of just how incredibly shocking, and we still only know the tip of the iceberg of this scandal has been. What some of the lessons are in general, and what some of the specific ways are that I think you can take this forward. Because I'm convinced this is not about the past, this is about the present and the future, and it is about the future of human rights protection in Europe at a time of enormous stress. So let me just say, when we wrote our first report on Azerbaijan in 2011, we couldn't understand what was going on. Repression was increasing, and the reports in the Council of Europe became ever more positive. When we then tried to understand what was going on and did some research, we got inside sources who explained to us in great detail how many people were getting what kind of presents. We could not reveal our sources, but we thought we don't need to. All we need to do is describe what is happening and then describe behavior that should be inexplicable. What was happening between 2005 and 2017 really couldn't be explained if you looked at it more critically. Election observers who came to Azerbaijan and declared, one led by Robert Walter, a British conservative, declaring that the elections were free and fair, ignoring all the expert advice of the ODIHR and saying this already before the elections were completed. People who continue to say we need a definition for political prisoners, and then when the definition was offered, campaigned to vote against it. And most importantly, this vote, exactly 10 years ago on the 23rd of January 2013. We have on our website, and anyone who looks for it will find it there, Azerbaijan debacle, excerpts from that debate. It's really interesting to read that again. What some of the people said, and how everyone at that day voted, because 125 people voted against the Stresser report. And they said things like this: sadly, Mr. Stresser has not visited the prisoners and prisons in Azerbaijan. Robert Walter. Well, he tried for 3 years, but he couldn't go. If the report is approved, those who deal with human organs and deal drugs to fund terrorism will be political prisoners. This is Leonid Slutsky, who is currently one of the leading Russian proponents of the genocidal war in Ukraine. If you do not want to endorse terrorists, vote no to Mr. Stresser. This is Agustin Conde, conservative Spaniard from Toledo, who also continued to always volunteer to go to Azerbaijan and observe elections. Many of the countries here have a pretty bad human rights record. Let those without sin throw the first stone. I love that. Basically, this was an Irish MP, Terry Layden, who said, everyone's bad. Why don't we have a good time? Mr. Agramont, who also wrote a report, which was a trap. The idea was people should vote for his report and reject the Stresser report, and he declared there was no problem. Said that I have been promised by the Azerbaijani government that all individuals will be released quickly. As we know, the rejection of the Stresser report led to an immediate wave of arrests, including of Anna Mamadli, later arrested in 2013 and sentenced in 2014, who this institution gave the Václav Havel Prize, and who was an advisor of Mr. Stresser, who was arrested in 2013. And then we had French conservatives who said we shouldn't draw too black a picture of the country, do not stigmatize it and think about its geopolitical situation. Or Thierry Mariani, also a French politician with Sarkozy, then advisor of Prime Minister Fillon, and today with Le Pen, who said, oh, the rapporteur could not get a visa. How sad. But I will vote for the high-quality report of Mr. Agramont. Now, one of the most interesting statements came from Mike Hancock, a British liberal, who also spent a lot of time in Azerbaijan every election year. Sadly, he couldn't explain this to us because he is no longer alive. But he said, if we're not careful, if we vote for the Stresser report, we are setting an undesirable precedent. Will all countries be subjected to the same scrutiny? I hope we do not, because then we cannot stop here. The report will be duplicated, time after time. And that was the point. By voting against the Stresser report, the idea that there was a definition of political prisoners developed by judges, applied already in 2001, supported by the Committee of Ministers, voted again in October 2012, that this definition of political prisoners could be applied by PACE to establish if there were systemic problems. And the Stresser report explains it very well. It says, yes, we have a court of human rights across the road. But if there is a systemic problem, we cannot wait for people to be years in prison and in the end, of course, they are released. That is already repression if it happens regularly. And that's why the Stresser report was so important, because it said in this case, we need a political serious assessment, we have a definition, and Mr. Stresser established that there was a systemic problem in Azerbaijan, and 125 people said there wasn't. This was a failure of the whole institution, because by then the real cover diplomacy went into turbocharge. Suddenly, almost all the factions, almost all the institutions were changing their tone. And I have a quote here, an internal document from a visit by the Secretary General at that time, Torbjörn Jagland, who visited Azerbaijan on the 24th of June at 8:45 in the morning. This was just after Anna Mammadli was sentenced, somebody who'd worked for the Council of Europe and for Mr. Stresser, and he was sentenced to 5 years in jail. Just after that, Torbjörn Jagland visits and says, first sentence of this Council of Europe internal paper, the Secretary General remarked that this has been a good start to Azerbaijan's chairmanship. Mammadli's case is not mentioned. On the case of another political prisoner, he just said that, of course, I quote, the judgment in respect to Ilgar Mammadov is not yet final. Well, everybody knew this was political too, but the Secretary General said we can't intervene yet. And then he said, of course, the definition of political prisoners should not be left exclusively to PACE. So what we had here was an institutional failure across the board. Secretary General, PACE, Committee of Ministers didn't react. And of course, the man who made his whole career defending Azerbaijan. From the start, he couldn't get there often enough. He went to every election observation mission. He wanted to be the rapporteur from the moment he arrived here. He ended up being the rapporteur. Pedro Agramont was then elected, unopposed, president of this assembly in 2016 and again in 2017 after the Italian prosecutors and our second report on caviar diplomacy, the first in 2012, the second in 2016, quoted already how Luca Volonte, who'd worked closely with Pedro Agramont, was running around with money of another MP, Elkan Süleymanov, who has also been sentenced in first instance by the Milan court, not yet final, but sentenced in first instance, running around distributing and mobilizing support. Now, what do we do with this? Thanks to a few people, and I remember in January 2017, even then it wasn't clear that there would be consequences. Remember, Pedro Agramont was just elected president, and at that time, PACE had a framework to prevent corruption which was worse than that of FIFA. There was no framework. Pedro Agramont determined if there would be any investigation into anything. But there were a few MPs then, and two of them sit here, and I remember your efforts then to try to mobilize the institution and say this is really the last chance. If there isn't now an investigation, if there isn't now a reaction, if there isn't now a strengthening of the framework, this institution is dead. And fortunately, it is not dead. Fortunately, a lot of changes took place since. But what now? And I go to the present and the future. The real legacy of the Stresser report is a vote he won in October 2012 It was actually the second time that a definition of political prisoners was approved by this assembly. And his report established a precedent that, contrary to Mike Hancock, who fears this, we really should repeat. This should be an organization where having political prisoners in a country should be as unacceptable as having the death penalty. You know, this should be a red line, because if you imprison people for political reasons, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of political activity, everything becomes moot. So this organization, I would recommend, looking forward to the May meeting in Reykjavik, should define and set out the goal that by the end of 2023, there should be no countries with political prisoners. Rather, there should be no political prisoners in any member state of the Council of Europe. That should be the legacy, the lesson from 2013. How do you achieve that? Well, you appoint, again, people to write Stresser reports. Number two. Number three, on countries where there is a suspicion. How do you establish this? Well, if there are court judgments by the European Court of Human Rights that are not implemented on imprisonment, there is a suspicion. And then you send people to those countries to investigate, as Mr. Stresser has done, if there are presumed political prisoners and a systemic problem. Perhaps we can have these reports already for Reykjavik. And then in Reykjavik, the member states, the real responsible powers that should then enforce this, should say, well, any country that doesn't do away with systemic political imprisonment should be suspended. Because that's what we've learned from Russia. Watching a country violate human rights, not implement European Court of Human Rights decisions, try to poison and kill people, then imprison them, like Mr. Navalny, who went to this court 20 times, more than any other living human being in Europe. He went 20 times to the European Court of Human Rights. It didn't help him in the end. That watching this without any reaction weakens the institution, and in the end doesn't keep the countries inside after all. So my recommendation would be, in honor of Mr. Stresser and all those who fought with him, and there were, of course, I think 79 who voted with him, and in honor of all those who since fought for this, and in honor of all those who supported him also in Azerbaijan at great risk and risked and then were imprisoned, trying to put together lists of political prisoners, that this organization should say, no more political prisoners from now on. We will have new Stresser reports. We will use this definition that corruption tried to destroy. And by the end of 2023, there should be a new start. And I think in this way, this would truly be drawing the lessons from what was the biggest scandal in the history of this institution, but it shouldn't be a terminal crisis. It should be a relaunch for a new beginning. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Gerald Knaus. This was a view into the history and perspective for the future. Already, we are already running out of time, but we need to go back on the timeline, and now then we come into and we collect signatures for an investigation. And now it's up to the Secretary General to explain that everything is on a good way. Björn, nice to have you here with us.
Thank you very much, Frank, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Yes, indeed, fighting corruption is very much about the present and certainly also about the future. And we have all seen the recent events within the European Parliament, just to mention it. Let me first of all commend you, Frank, for the work that you have done on the draft report under preparation now on the respect for the rule of law and fight against corruption within the Council of Europe. The corruption scandal that erupted in 2017 was undoubtedly a wake-up call for the Council of Europe. Corruption can occur anytime, anywhere, and no one is immune. But it is really our responsibility to take necessary steps and see how we can prevent it and stop it when it emerges. We must show zero tolerance to corruption. Of course, the Council of Europe is very much a rule-based organization, and we work closely with our 46 member states to prevent and combat corruption, notably through our monitoring body GRECO, the Group of States Against Corruption. It is certainly positive that since the scandal erupted, now it's 5-6 years ago, the Parliamentary Assembly has taken a number of steps to reform its ethical and integrity framework. These reforms were inspired, among others, by the IBAC report, but also on the Greco recommendations and reports. Now, it is important that the Assembly practice and monitor its application, and that we ensure the effective follow-up. However, the Parliamentary Assembly was not and is not alone in having taken further steps to prevent corruption and malpractice. 4 years ago, the Council of Europe, as such, commissioned a review of its entire ethical framework, and its findings have been the basis for new and forthcoming policies that update the framework and reduce ethical risk. As from 1st of January this year, revised staff regulations and new staff rules have entered into force, including a chapter on staff obligations. They make it crystal clear that it is staff members' duty to avoid unlawful and unethical behavior, that they must report wrongdoing, and that we as staff should neither seek nor accept instructions from any third party, nor hold any office or accept any favor that is incompatible with our statute as an international civil servant. We have also issued a new code of conduct, setting clear ethical expectations of our staff, accompanied also by a handbook with some illustrating and concrete examples. We are also about to finalize another initiative, which is the new Speak Up policy, which will help us report wrongdoing, making clear how we can do this and who to report to, and also outlining how staff will be protected from any retaliation when reporting allegations in good faith. Finally, I also want to mention to you today the new charter for our DIO, the Directorate of Internal Oversight, that has been now adopted. The aim there is to set out clearly the mandate of the DIO in its three functions: its audit, evaluation, and investigation. The charter also aims to codify at a high level the existing legal framework and in full compliance with international investigating standards. I believe the new charter and the new Speak Up policy may be used as the legal basis for addressing allegations of possible fraud, corruption, and the breach of internal rules. And of course, we also have in place an ethics officer in the Council of Europe on a full-time basis, who provides individual advice to staff members on specific issues brought to his attention, and also advises management of the organization on more general integrity issues. Taken together, I believe that all these new initiatives and the policies will no doubt significantly strengthen the organization's ethical framework and make it clearer, more accessible, and more efficient, reinforcing the effort we put into combating corruption in our organization. Having said that, this is an area in which our cooperation and idea sharing, how we can even improve further, is very much welcome. And I really welcome also the dialogue between the Assembly, between the Committee of Ministers and the Member States, and also the Secretary General and her office. And I certainly also look forward to our continued cooperation and dialogue. Maybe just a word at the end to what you mentioned, Gerald Klaus. I knew Mr. Jagland as Secretary General very well. I think it's not that fair to refer to a single internal report and in that way describe a certain situation. So we should be careful when we also look back at what has happened in the past in how we approach this. And rather than listen to his own statements, and I think right now he's preparing his memoir, so it'd be very interesting also to read what they will say about these issues. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. Maybe we can invite him to discuss it with him as well, because it's, yeah, the interesting thing, it happened. This is the problem, no? At the end, all the institutions, in the end, it's not the accusation that somebody take money or whatever, but some take money and others were not able to prevent. So the problem is we, as you know, we are running out of time. We have 3 minutes left. I would ask
10 minutes because reports are not
three, okay, a few minutes longer, but I would like to take first 3 very short questions or remarks, but very short, and then we can answer here, and then let's see how we proceed. The first one was 1, 2, 3, Sunna, member of the Assembly from Iceland.
Yes, hi, thank you for your very interesting remarks. I just wanted to add a little bit to it because one of our distinguished speakers talked about replicating the Strasser report, and I would just like to say that in a sense it was. I wrote a report about reported cases of political prisoners in Azerbaijan, which was adopted by the Assembly in 2020. And similarly, I also wrote a report about political prisoners in Russia, which was adopted last year, if I'm not mistaken, in my memory. So we have reconfirmed this definition of political prisoner. What I do think is lacking is the follow-up of the Committee of Ministers. And we know, in the case of Azerbaijan, that you have an infringement proceeding ruling from the court, and therefore a duty to act by the Committee of Ministers, which I don't think has been followed up properly in the case of Azerbaijan. And I worry that because of the situation in Russia as it stands now, that our minds understandably are very much in this situation, that we are letting it slide what is going on in Azerbaijan because we feel we have bigger, more pressing issues, but we shouldn't. But I would just like to reiterate that we did manage to complete a report based on the definition of political prisoners, and I was faced with the same criticism of bias against Azerbaijan, and some very inflammatory statements were made against me by the Azerbaijani authorities, but it didn't prevent the report to be accepted that time around. So I just wanted that to be part of the record of this meeting because it didn't sound like we had actually managed this time around, but we did in 2020.
Thank you, Sunna. A very short introduction.
Yeah, thank you. I basically took the floor to thank everyone who kept following the situation in Azerbaijan. For those who don't know me, I am from Azerbaijan, and I am from the opposition Republican Alternative Party led by Ilgar Mammadov, and I know almost all political prisoners personally. Many of them happen to be my friends, especially thanks to Madam Eva's daughter, whose report I was not a member of the parliament at that time, but in our legal committee during the consideration of follow-ups, I fully supported the statement that our committee issued. And I do agree that the situation with the political prisoners needs to be kept under attention. The situation is relatively contradictory. In some areas there is some progress, but in some areas there is negative development. But anyway, without taking much of your time, I would like to thank you all, and also reassure you that me personally and many in Azerbaijan in opposition and civil society sector stay cooperative, and you can always rely on the civil society in Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Rudi Rentschler from German Liberals. I was very pleased on the report of Christoph, a friend of mine. We have been 50 years ago in the same youth organization. My question is now, the 125 votes against the report,
How much does that
how was this managed? First, from whom to whom got the money flow? Then did this affect the decisions in the political group? Do we know how at that time were the decisions in the political group advices or just a free vote? Usually the political group says a recommendation. Do we know how at that time the political group gave their representation? That was very, and then how much people got paid and how much people got just an advice, and they followed advices of people who had been paid. Can we redraw this situation? Thanks.
Well, I can be very short because my colleague has distributed, and it's online, this one of our newsletters which sums up. It's an interview looking back in 2021, but there are also the links to all the documents we produced from 2011, including this detailed protocol of that debate and who voted exactly how and what the party group leaders said at that time. It's called The Strangest Love Affair. You find it also online. The love is, of course, those of some MPs with an autocratic regime at that time. But just one thing on the countries, it is striking that in that vote, all 18 Russian MPs turned up. They were very diligent. And of course, all 18 voted against the Stresser report. 10 out of 12 Turkish MPs voted against the Stresser report. 9 out of 12 Spanish MPs. 9 out of 18 Italians. Of course, all 6 Azerbaijanis. 5 out of 7 Czechs, 5 out of 7 Greeks, and then it's an interesting list if you go down. On the other side, there is also a list of, well, it's interesting. 11 Germans voted against the report, 3 abstained. 6 Swedes voted against, nobody abstained, nobody was in favor. Other countries, well, you find it here. On the money, well, I recommend you read some of our reports and you follow, and I can share stuff. Of course, we know the tip of the iceberg. The truth is that there was never anything like we see now in Belgium. There were never prosecutors except in Italy. What the Italian prosecutors found, because transfers were suspicious, was that one person admitted, I mean, he received 2.4 million euros, unlikely for himself, but he admitted he had a contract for 10 million euros. He said that himself. And 3 people were sentenced in first instance, 2 Azerbaijanis and Volonte. It's now an appeal. But unfortunately, a lot of people who would know things have not come forward. So the real investigation is still to be done. And I'm convinced from all the research we did for all these years, there must be more than 100 people in this over the 20 years that this policy was continuing. And most of them escaped. It was the perfect crime, came away with no consequence.
And you know, we prepared people prepared the IBEC report. I don't know how many pages, 250, and finally we sent it to all the national parliaments. And how many parliaments acted on this question? I don't know how many answers we get, a very few. And the German parliament, not enough, really far away from to be enough, but they did a little bit. But I don't know any other consequences from other parliaments, to be honest. We have maybe time for 1 or 2 very short questions, please. Can you introduce yourself? Yeah.
My name is Julia. I represent Objective TV Azerbaijan. On the age of the International Human Rights Day, the 9th of December 2022, former prisoner of conscience, famous political activist Bəxtiyar Haciyev was arrested. This is the second time for him to serve the sentence due to his beliefs and activity. From your point of view, what can be done by the Council of Europe to stop the permanent violation of the freedom of speech and prevent the further political convictions in the form of revolving door? Moreover, should the new reporter on political prisoners be assigned, as during the last 10 years, the situation on political prisoners hasn't changed? Thank you very much.
Okay, then who wants to answer to this question?
You answer.
I answer. It's always what I just can say. This organization has no mandate. We are not the whatever. We don't have troops. We cannot go to any country to let people free. So what we just can do is to evaluate the situation. We can use our instrument, and that are a lot, to make reports, to use our CPT, our anti-torture committee, to look into the situation. We have our election observation mission, and we have to make a clear, or we have to report a clear picture about what is going on, and that we should try to do. For sure, at the end, we are not the ones who can let people free, but it's necessary to understand that there is a hope in the world, and it's a hope in Europe that there is an organization who speak very clear about the situation. If this organization, some of them corrupted, do the the totally opposite. They discourage those one who fight for human rights, then it's a total failure of the organization, and we really try to change the situation that we really can make, let's say, good reports who tell the truth about the situation. Finally, it's a court. The court is the heart of this organization, and for sure, a country has to respect the judgments. And if you ask me, we start already to count the judgments of Azerbaijan, and they don't follow. And then it's, you know, the case of Mr. Mamadov, Article 46.4. At the end, this is the last option to bring a country to fulfill this judgments. But at the end, we just can monitor, we can speak open about it. We cannot let people free, but we must speak about the situation. This is what we have to do. I understand that Christoph Stresser maybe can have the last word in this debate, and then we have to close.
Yes, I want to make it very brief, because the debate, especially from your side, shows me that there is a lot of more hope for the possibility to make changes within this institution as 10 years ago. I'm sure we had a side event such as this one during the resolution was discussed, and we had guests from Azerbaijan who came here, who had free speech. They came home and were arrested. And they were not arrested because they violated the freedom of speech. There were any other crime. I know very, very good the case, the very popular case of Kadia Ismailia. What was a very, very clear violation of all standards that here in the Council of Europe are managed. And this is, I'm glad that you are here and can say what you want, and I hope it's good for you, it's good for us in any way. And this is for me that we have hope, we can have hope that the work, the consequent work for realize human rights in the member states of the Council of Europe, that it might be, it's not a short success, but it might be successful on the road. And therefore to fight and to do it, this is what I hope that everybody who is sitting here in the Council of Europe is going on for the next time. Thank you very much, and I'm glad that I could be here once again after 10 years, and yeah, I hope I can support everybody who makes this very valuable work here. Thank you.
So thanks to you, thanks to all of you here, and to all of you for your interest, and we will proceed. You are invited to refresh outside. Those one who have some time, I have to rush to the next committee meeting.
Hello. My name is Julia.
Deputy of the Permanent Mission of Armenia to the Council of Europe, and you represent, I was just wondering, it's Objective TV, is it an online platform?
Yes, it's an online platform. It's a YouTube channel and TV channel.
And you are based in Baku?
No, we are based in Geneva. Now I'm waiting for my director and our team. They are still on their way.
So you are based in